What's happening, people? Welcome back to Out of the Loop. My name is La. Today we're going to be looking at some drums. So I kind of wanted to show you guys some different stages of drums. So whether you're a beginner, maybe then intermediate, and then pro/La level. But yeah, I wanted to show also some drums that we've just brought out. So we've got a new drum pack called Pure Drums. This is something I have spent a lot of time on trying to get it, sounding perfect, and something I like using in my own songs. And yeah, I'm really happy with it. I'm really proud of it. So it's out now. It's on the website, which will be linked down below. And that will be all the samples that you hear will be taken from that Pure Drums pack. Okay, cool. So let's go into the beginner stage, right? So the beginner would be maybe, you're less than a year into production, and you just kind of do a little bit basic drums, maybe just using loops or something like that, and you're doing kind of some questionable processing as well. Maybe the volumes are off and things like that. So let's have a look. This is the beginner drums. Okay, so that's kind of one half of it. I just wanted to show another half. So this is something I see quite a lot with EQ. So this is on the kick. And a EQ mistake I see a lot with kind of noob producers is they boost a lot in the subby kind of meaty part of the kick, because that's where we get that nice warm punch, and they take away the click of the kick, the kind of transient, and it sounds a bit like this. It's just really overpowering with the sub, and we're not getting any of that click coming through, so the kick isn't punching through. So yeah, that's a very common mistake. Another thing here that you might notice is the volume is very low on this kick here. The kick is really important with the drums. It's the grounding kind of rhythm or instrument that's there, and it really makes all the other drums sound like punchy, and they're kind of bouncing off something. So if the volume is off and it's very low, it just doesn't come through, and the drums just sound really off. Another thing to note is there's no groove. So here, I've automated the groove down. By the way, you can do this on the master. So yeah, I've automated the groove so it's off at this part of the track. And then later on you'll see it coming on. But it's very stiff. So the drums are very robotic and hitting exactly, where you think they would be. And for me, it sounds pretty stiff. Maybe you like drums like that, but for me, it sounds very stiff. And then let's actually look into the drums. So I've took the processing off for now, so maybe you wouldn't do any drum group processing. Maybe you would just do individual processing. And the clap itself, so here we've just got a single clap. It's just hitting the same, the velocity is the same every time, the rhythm is very predictable. It's pretty loud as well, the velocity is as loud as it can go. And it's a little bit overpowering. There's no balance between the clap and the other elements in the mix. This is something I see a lot with my students. So if we have a look now as well, we maybe have a loop here. This is very common. There'll just be a PML loop or wherever you're getting your loops from, and you'll just rely on that loop to kind of do your percussion or your hats. Right? And then here is a big thing, right, with the hats. I see this a lot. They have reverb or delay directly onto the channel. So we have this hat channel here, which is playing this. Just a nice hat, all good. But with all this reverb on, with big decay and then the delay on, the hat becomes more wet. It's not very present in the mix. And also with the delay, it just constantly ticks over. It kind of interrupts the groove. So it's not very clean, is what I would say. I'm not saying this is wrong, and none of these things are wrong, but there's just ways that you can improve your drums. So right, that is our beginner kind of drums. Maybe you're doing those kind of things, and this is where you can maybe improve. So this is the bit more intermediate. Okay, so here there's a little bit more going on. The balance between the drums is a little bit better, right? So the kick volume is louder than the other elements there. We also have the full kick in here, so we're getting that nice transient as opposed to it being like this. Just a very deep kick. That punch really helps. Okay, and then let's have a look at the clap here. So maybe you got a little bit of ghost hits here, which is making it a little bit more interesting. The velocity isn't super loud. It's changing. It's a little bit lower, but still kind of stiff. Not much going on with the groove. Not many different hits there, or ghost hits, or drum fills, or anything like that. And I'm saying with intermediate here, I mean, you might be doing drums much better than this if you're like kind of 2 years in. But let's be honest, most people are just throwing loops onto their track. They're not really even programming the drums in. So it's kind of hard to judge where you're at. But something like this. And then if we have a look here at the hats, now you might be introducing like a little 16 hat, which is this here. And maybe you play with the velocity to make sure that it's not stiff, so it's sounding all good. And then you're prioritizing this open hat here, so you get that boots and cats kind of feel. Right, so all good there, sounding really nice. And then maybe you layer in a shaker as well. And that sounds all good, and it sounds nice and interesting. So this could be really good drums that you could use. There's nothing wrong with these drums. I've not done any obvious errors here, but they are a little bit stiff in my opinion. They could be a little bit more interesting, maybe a little bit more layering going on. But yeah, this is a very good foundation for drums. And a lot of the time with some tracks, you might want your drums just as simple as that. You might not want them to be very busy. With my drums, I put quite a bit in them, and sometimes I need to strip them back. But it's good for me to show you kind of like a bit more busier, complex drums. So that's what we're going to do here. So one thing I have done here is I've left the groove off here. I still see people that are maybe 2 years into the production and they don't use swing because they don't know how to use it. So swing for me is amazing. It can really bring a lot of life and kind of a human feel to your drums. And I think the issue is that a lot of people don't know that if you use your swing, you want to apply it to everything in the track because everything wants to hit on that same timing, right? And what a lot of people will do is they'll try and do their own swing where they kind of just move things slightly off. But if you do that with, say, this clap here, but then you don't do it with your hats, the timing will just feel really off. A little bit like that, right? You need everything to kind of be on that same groove. So the best thing to do is to get a groove pool, make sure that everything is nice and quantized within here, and then you apply the groove. So you'll hear it now with the swing. Let's have a little play. I think we've got some shakers coming in. All right, so you get the idea there. That's kind of like my, I guess, professional drums. Let's go over them and see what's going on. The kick doesn't change here. The kick is all good. I've left the volume up high. And then the processing, I've left it the same because the kick sounded good on this one. But let's now go down into the drums. And one thing I might have missed, did I put the processing on here? Now we've got the processing as well. We'll go over the processing afterwards, but let's just have a look at the MIDI programming. So we got a few layers of claps and snares here, right? So it's not just one single sound. They've all got different velocities, and I'm carefully kind of crafting which ones I want to put in there to make a full sound. But it doesn't sound like loads of claps. They kind of layer nicely together, right? And that's due to a bit of compression that I'm doing on the group. And also the little things I'm doing here are some ghost hits. So these little hits here, and also doing a bit of a drum fill at the end, if you have a listen. That's also with some other drum fill that I'm going to show you, but within the clap drum rack, which is also another thing I didn't mention, using drum racks to build your drums is a great thing to do because you can audition different things. So rather than just having one clap that you commit to, that you've searched through for like hours, and you found that ultimate clap or snare that you found, and you're like, yes, this is it. And it just doesn't really fit with the track because of just the way that things are sounding. It's better to have loads of your drums in here. So I've got all of the out of the loop drums. I've put them all of the out of the loop claps and snares. I just drag them in, put them into a drum rack, and then I can audition them and I can layer them together. So you can just flick through different ones, right, and find one that you like. So let's continue on a little bit. Let's go down. I've added some kind of ear candy things here. This is something that a lot of professional producers would do. So right at the start, we've got this kind of reverse clap going into a big reverb, big black hole reverb. And that's just going to add a bit of noise going into this part here. I've also got a kind of white noise blast. Right, on its own, it would sound bad, but in context, you got that shh. And this is just a bit of white noise from operator, and then it's just like a really short blast of it, which leads into the clap. So the clap is here, it leads into that, right? Okay, moving on. Also with this, make sure it's very quiet. You see here, it's not loud. It's very important you get your volume levels right. There's a whole another side of production, you know, your volume levels. It's something that you improve over time when your ear gets better, but you'll hear that, for me at least, it sounds very balanced with the volume. Anyway, we'll go down a bit. So where are the hats here? The hats are a little bit more complex. So we've got some layering going on here, a lot of layers of different things. We've got a ride or open hat to start the drums. Lots of little ghost hits in between of all different velocity. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm doing some automation with a vocoder. So I'm building this vocoder release. I'll exaggerate it so you hear it. Okay, I'm doing that, a little bit of that, just on this part here. Let's have a look. And I would also be doing it here. I just forgot to copy the automation over. Right, so the hats kind of evolve and they get a little bit more noisy, just as the drums are progressing, so they don't feel stagnant. I've also took off all the effects that are directly onto the sound. I never put the reverb or delay directly onto my drums. I would always try and use return channels so the drums are really nice and clean. Same with synths as well and vocals and things like that. It's always good to use return channels rather than using things directly on the sounds. Okay, what else do we have in here? We got a little loop to complement things. So this is a little organic loop. You can hear it's very organic. This is me recording a shaker. I was shaking some rice or something like that in a jar. And I always try and layer some kind of organic, noisy loop into the drums because it just makes them feel a little bit more alive. Very quiet though, they're not super prominent. Okay, and then what do we have here? This is me beatboxing. It's the same thought process as this. I just want something kind of human in there and loose. But what I did is I put a little resonator on here because it's got a little bit of harmony, or it adds some harmonics. So I'll take this off. Okay, so it sounds pretty interesting like that, and I could leave it like that. But with this on, I get this little harmonic thing layering with my drums. And this is just the resonator. I found the key that I want to be in. I put the fifth, and then I put an octave up, and then I put this dry wet up. And with the colour, that's what's adding that kind of harmonic sound. Alright, it's just a nice little layer that you can put into your drums so they don't feel stagnant. The other thing that I've done here is I've put a drum fill. So it's a nice bold drum like snare or something like that. Put some overdrive and a bit of reverb directly onto it because I want it to be further back in the mix. So you see the difference here. With the main drums, I don't want them to be far back in the mix. The snare roll or any drum fill, I do want that to be a little bit more washed out or like further back in the mix. So I'm putting reverb directly onto it. So the shakers here, I've put them into a group and then I've panned them left and right. So on the intermediate one, we have a shaker, just a singular shaker, and then there's no panning going on. With here, we've got the one left and right, so the shakers feel nice and full. And it also allows for the other drums that are down the middle to have more room. So let's have a listen to these. Here. One thing I would have done, or I should have done, is balance the volume a little bit more. So we have because right now the left is a bit more dominant than the right. It's nice to have them where they're a little bit more equal. So we just bring this one down. Yeah, bring it down a little bit more. And what I do is I group them together so I can see the overall volume. So we can see now the volume is a little bit more equal, rather than one of these channels being really high. So yeah, it's just making sure they're equal. The other thing I'm doing is I'm sidechaining the shakers to the kick. Because the shakers are playing constantly, it's nice to have the kick punch through rather than them just playing over the top of the kick. Very light sidechain here. Let's have a listen all together with everything. And I will go over the processing now. Okay, so let me just show you this processing here. We'll just turn it off so you hear the difference. Okay, so the difference there with the processing off is the volume difference between the elements is more dynamic, which might be what you want. So I'm not saying that you always process your drums this way. You might want the drums to be dynamic, right? You might want the volume difference between the snare and the hats to be different. But in this case, I want them to be a little bit more glued together. I want a bit more harmonics or more frequencies and more perceived volume. So that's why I've got this kind of processing here. So what this is doing, I've got some glue compression, which is basically just taming the loudest thing in the drum group, which is the clap or snare in this case, as you can see. It's reacting to that snare, so I'm taming it a little bit. I'm not doing it really aggressive with a heavy attack, which a lot of newer producers would do, because that's killing it too much. I want some of that click to come through. You hear the looser I have the attack, the more click comes through on the drums. Around there, little sweet spot where it softens it a little bit, but it's not killing the transient. And then we're just making up for the volume here. A little bit more. And what this does, just with this compressor alone, we are bringing up the quieter parts of the drums, which in this case would be like the hats. They're coming up a little bit, and then the clap and stuff is being tamed slightly. And so we have an overall more glued sound, is a more consistent sound as well. A little bit of EQ here, just tidying up any lows, but not doing much else. Don't need to do any tidying up in terms of like taking away any nasty frequencies, because I've done that when I've created the samples. So if you get good sample selection, which is also the key to great drums, then you won't need to do much external processing because the samples will sound great. And then I'm doing a bit of saturation here, a little boost, and then just making up for the volume. So I'm not tricking myself by thinking it's better because I'm adding drive. Let me just turn this on and off so you hear the difference. Hopefully you can hear, I mean, it is very subtle, but what it's doing is adding a little bit more life to the drums. It's making them feel a little bit bolder and a little bit bigger. Not by a lot, could really exaggerate it, but I don't want that. I just want a little bit of saturation. So there we go. That is pretty much the drum processing and the kind of pro drums, I would say. Obviously you can go further. There's a lot of different types of drums you can do. You can do breakbeat, afro, all this kind of stuff. But this is kind of like my melodic housey drums that I would do, or house drums. So yeah, I hope this was helpful for you guys. Have any questions, please put them in the comments. If you like the video, put it in the comments. It helps with the algorithm. Like the video, of course, and subscribe, please, if you haven't already. Please check out the pack, which I've got linked down below. I just brought it out yesterday, so I still need to do some demos for it, but it's on the website if you guys want to grab it. All right, guys, catch you in the next video. Peace.